Today on the First Time Storytelling broadcast, I'm very excited. My guest is David Armstrong. David is the president and co-founder of Monument Wealth Management in Alexandria, Virginia, and he is a retired Marine Corps lieutenant colonel. And it is the Marine Corps network that brought us together. So he went golfing with one of my former bosses, retired Brigadier General Cooling, who will be on the show later this month. And so he connected us together. And now here is David on the
Yeah,
show.
here we are. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, to share the story of his first time hiking 200 plus miles of the Pacific Crest Trail, better known as the PCT. Welcome to the show, David.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I'm excited to share my story.
Well, same here. So let's get into this because that is no small feat to get into hiking the PCT or even a part of it. So what inspired you to say, okay, I'm going to do this?
Well, it certainly wasn't all the time we spent hiking in the Marine Corps to inspire me to do
No.
anything like this. It was actually, I became an artilleryman because I didn't want to be in the infantry and do all of that hiking. But it's a little bit of a different environment when you do it, as a civilian with all of the nice lightweight gear and actually out there enjoying yourself. But I can't recall exactly what it was, that initial thing that inspired me, but I had just turned 50 years old, and I started joking around that my midlife crisis was going to be this hike, and I had been thinking about doing the Appalachian Trail because I'm here in Northern Virginia and it's local to me. That's what most people do out here. And I was joking with my wife and I said, I think for my midlife crisis, I'm going to do this hike. And she said, well, I can tell you two things. She goes, I think it's a lot safer than a Corvette, so that's going for you. She goes, and I will guarantee you it's a lot cheaper than a girlfriend, so go for it. So that's kind of the joke. And then I just really got interested in it, and I called another old buddy of mine from the Marines, and I said, hey, I'm thinking about doing this Appalachian Trail thing, and I'm gonna section hike it 30 days at a time. He said, well, if you're going to do if you're going to do like 30 sections, 30 days at a time, and it takes 6 or 7 years to finish a whole trail, you should go do the Pacific Crest Trail because there's so many different environments that you walk through. So you get to experience the Sierra Mountains, you get to experience the desert, you get to experience the Pacific Northwest. And I thought that was a fantastic idea. So I researched it and decided, well, at my age, I'm going to start out with the hardest section of the trail, which is the Sierra Mountain section. And started making my plan and got after it. So that's how it started. And that was back in 2018, August of 2018, I did it.
Well, fitting that was after your 50th birthday because it is your birthday. Is it today your birthday?
It was just Sunday. It was Sunday.
Last Sunday. All right.
Yep.
Happy belated birthday.
Yeah, thank you. So so I took a year, I took a year to plan it because it's not, when people ask me, they say, hey, did you have any experience hiking or anything like that? I mean, I really didn't have any experience in that kind of hiking. But as you know, in the Marines, we have a lot of experience in moving from point A to point B and carrying stuff on our back and setting up a tent and sleeping outside and living. So I felt like I did have some experience, but I started researching it. And then once I committed to doing it, it took about a year to plan and learn. So it was a lot of time online and everything, but that was it. Once I decided to do it, that was it.
So the PCT requires a permit. If you do just a short version, do you still need a permit?
Mm-hmm, you do. So, and the permitting process is actually, I feel like thinking back on it all was one of the harder processes, because if you're going to do the Pacific Crest Trail from one end to the other, I think it's just one permit. But if you're going to section hike, you've got to get permits for every national forest or national park that you go through. And so I was able to get a permit. And that was a big part of going into the decision making on this too, because permits are very, very difficult to get, especially in summer, because it's a very popular trail, especially through the Sierra Mountains. So my initial plan was I was going to hike what they call southbound, starting in Yosemite and then coming all the way down and finishing at Mount Whitney. And that was going to be the end of my hike. Well, actually a little bit, about 35 miles south of Mount Whitney. But I didn't get, and that's the most popular. I think 75% of the hikers hike what is essentially the John Muir Trail section of the PCT. They hike it south from Yosemite. I didn't get that permit. And so I got the permit that allowed me to hike north. So I started out at the about 35 miles south of Mount Whitney, and then hiked all the way up towards Yosemite. And that's considered to be a harder way to go because you don't increase in altitude as you're hiking, you decrease in altitude. So you start out crossing the highest peak within the first 5 days, but that's all part of the story. But that's how I ended up getting my permits, and I was a northbound hiker, and that's how I did it.
So you felt pretty confident that you were able to handle this. You had you had experience from the Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. Did you have the equipment? Did you have to go buy all new stuff?
I bought all new stuff. Yeah. The only thing I took with me that I had in the Marine Corps was my Leatherman. It's really easy to get into these chat rooms and everything and do all of the research and research the equipment, because there's a lot of equipment out there. And of course, the lighter it is, the more expensive it is generally. But there were some unique challenges to hiking that section of the Pacific Crest Trail, because you have to carry all of your food in what's called a bear canister, which is a can that's essentially bear proof. So that adds some weight, and it also adds some constraint too, because you can't just pack your chow down into your bag wherever. You have to get, everything has to fit in that can. So that drives a lot of resupply too. So there was a lot of research about where do I mail my food to, where do I pick it up? Is the food gonna, so I had to make a lot of assumptions about how fast I was going to travel, how many miles a day I was going to travel. And I didn't have a whole lot of experience in that, but I just knew that, and I didn't do a lot of training for it either. I did some, I'm going to call them gear shakedown hikes, where I just went on a 5-mile hike to make sure everything was, and that was helpful, right, yeah, in making sure that everything worked and how I wanted to have things packed. But I'm in Northern Virginia. There's no way that I'm training for altitudes above 10,000 feet. And for, I would say, a majority of the time that I was on that hike, I was at 8,500 feet or higher. And most of that time, actually, most of it was above 10,000 feet. So there was just no way I was going to acclimate to that. I was just going to have to kind of do it on the fly.
Now, did you have anybody who was going to come with you, or did you ask people and it ended up being just you? How did that play out?
So when I first, that's interesting, because when I first said I wanted to do it, all my friends were like, "Oh, I would love to do that with you." And then all of a sudden it's like, "All right, we got to get our permits." And oh yeah, and the permitting process is really the big barrier to get to people wanting to go with you. So ultimately I ended up just deciding to do it by myself, which kind of ended up being the way I wanted to do it too, because I don't know why I wanted to do this so bad, but it just got into me, and I was like, I'm going to go do this. And so, yeah, I just started out by myself. In fact, the logistics of the whole thing were that I flew from, here in Washington, D.C. out to Mammoth, California. And when I got to the airport there, I basically took the clothes that I was wearing on the plane off and put them into a bag, and went to a local hotel and just paid to have my stuff stored, like, stored luggage. And I said, "Hey, I'm going to be gone for a month." And they charged me like $100 or something like that. So I just left it in the bellhop, the baggage claim of a hotel, and walked back out to the road and hitched a ride to the beginning of the trail where I was going to start. And I just started walking all by myself.
What were you feeling? Like, what was going through your head? What were you feeling at that time?
So at first there was a lot of anxiety because I didn't understand the daily routine of the trail yet. So things like, where do you get water, and how fast do you run out of water? And I knew at altitude I'd be getting dehydrated a lot more just from my breath at altitude. And so I had a lot of anxiety over making sure my water was full at all times, because I didn't know where the next water stream was going to be. And of course, I chose to filter all of my water on my hike. So I brought all my water filtration equipment. And so every time I saw a little running stream, at first I was filling everything back up because I wasn't really sure. And then I figured out that there are really a lot of places on the trail to get water. I started to settle down a little bit about that. But I think a lot of my initial anxiety was I going to get altitude sickness? And in the Marines in the past, I had been at altitude before and I had gotten some bad headaches. That was about the end of it. So I was kind of bracing for the headaches and things like that. But I just started out slow, and I just kept putting one foot in front of the other. And the next thing you know, I was 210 miles into it, but I'll get to that part. But yeah, the first couple days were, and I would pass people on the trail and ask people to take my picture or things like that, but I didn't really socially interact with anybody until about the fifth day. So um,
So is
by
that
the
by
time,
choice? But like being out there, you had prepared for a year and now it's happening. So
yeah,
you had the anxiety about the water, but are you like, hey, I'm really here. This is happening and this is so great to be here and the views. Like, was some of that going
it was,
on?
yeah. And so at first it was definitely, and as I look back through my picture roll, I was taking a lot more pictures the first couple, I was taking pictures every 2 seconds because everything was kind of new. And, it was by choice that I started by myself. But as I was explaining before, I passed a lot of people because 75% of the people hiking that trail are coming the opposite direction. So I was always passing somebody and saying hi, but it was rare that I was hiking along in the same direction at the same pace with anybody else. And what ended up happening is I got farther and farther down the trail. By the fifth day, by the fourth night, I was camped at a campsite that was very, very popular, with everybody staging to go up and over the highest pass on the John Muir Trail on the PCT at that section. It's called Forester Pass, and it's at 13,100 feet or 13,200 feet. And that's the highest pass you go over on that section of the hike. And so it's very popular for people to camp at this one particular site, to kind of get up the next morning, get up over that peak before the afternoon thunder showers roll in. So you have time on the backside to get to your next trail. And obviously, way up there at 13,000 feet, there's not any water, so you're resupply. You're managing your water too. So I finally caught up with some people at a campsite where I started to socialize with some people, and I was like, "Oh, these guys are really great. I'm gonna hike the next day with them. Like, I want to go up over Forester Pass with a pack of people, encouraging each other." And we all woke up at the same time and started walking, and those guys just took off. They were gone. I never saw them again. They were way faster hikers than I was, and I knew that at my age and the fact that I was conditioning myself still to the altitude, like I had to hike my own hike. I had to do my own pace and not get pulled into what everybody else wanted to do. So by even the fifth day, I got up to Forester Pass. I was by myself for about 25 minutes before the next person even came in the opposite direction that could take my camera and take a picture of me. So
But
um,
what are you thinking about? Like, are you reminiscing on life? Are you in the moment of each step that you take? What?
yeah, so in the beginning, I was really captivated by the scenery and the beauty of it all, and kind of just being outside and just living out of my own pack. And there's no cell signal out there at all. So I had a GPS that could send text messages through the MRSAT, and so I was able to beam my location to people, and they'd get an email and be able to see where I was on the trail. So people were tracking me and knew how I was doing. But for the most part, I was really cut off. So I saw that very first pass at 13,100 feet. I was like, if I make it over that, every single pass after that is a lower and lower altitude. So like that, I focused on that for my first 5 days. But then the loneliness started to set in and a little bit of altitude sickness. So fortunately, on that fifth day, I had gone up over the pass and I started walking back down the backside, so decreasing in altitude. And I started to experience a very common side effect of altitude sickness, which is just complete loss of appetite, which is very dangerous out there when you're burning 5 or 6 thousand calories a day and you're really struggling to consume 2,500. I don't seem to have any trouble consuming 2,500 calories every single day in my life here, but on the trail for some reason it's very difficult to. And it's a different sort of you're just eating anything, sugar, anything you can to get energy, because you're burning a lot out there. And I linked up with four or five other guys who were hiking in the same direction I was, and they were a little bit older than I was, and they were hiking the same pace I was. So for the rest of that day, after going over there and getting some altitude sickness, I camped with them, and that was really sort of like a turning point in my journey, because now I had a group of guys that I really liked, and we were socializing, and I didn't know them, and I was hiking the same speed they were. We had the same agenda. We were going to go out over a pass and get our first resupply out in town 3 days later. So I was like, well, at the very least, I'll hike with these guys for 3 days. And I did that, and I ended up staying with them on for the entire remainder of the journey. And so I made some lifelong friends that I'll never lose touch with, and just some fantastic people, and I would have never met them had I not been out there.
So how much more elevated being out there with them was the conversation and the connection?
Well, so a lot of the conversation would start with, I'll just go through a typical day. So I'd wake up in the morning with them and we would break out our maps and decide where are we going to roughly try to get to tonight for camping. And when you're trying to create your plan and plan your next camping site, you always want to be co-located with some sort of good water source because you're cooking and everything else like that. So we'd take a look at the map and we'd say like, oh, we're doing a lot of, altitude today, so let's keep it to 8 miles, or hey, most of this is downhill, let's do 12 or 13 miles a day. And so we would talk about the altitude, we would talk about the length of the hike and where we were roughly planning to finish up. And as we got into more of a rhythm, I was the slower hiker going up the hills. They were much more like billy goats than I was, so they had much more speed going up the hills, and then I would catch them on the downhills. So I would always be the first person to break camp in the morning too. And that's also the Marine in me, right? Like once I woke up, I started packing everything up. Like I came out of my tent, I was ready to go. And so, whereas they would get out of the tent and kind of lay around a little bit, cook food, and then tear all their stuff down later. So I would go first during the day. And then wherever we were at 12 o'clock around lunchtime, I would stop, everybody would catch up to me. And then we would all hike the rest of the afternoon pretty much together into our next campsite. But that really elevated my experience too, because I had an opportunity to get to know people. They were all from California, Northern California, the Fresno area. They were retired school teachers. One was not retired, but he had served time in the Navy. And they just had all kinds of different jobs. One was an electrician, one was an emergency room doctor. And so it was just really interesting meeting a bunch of people I probably would have never met in any other environment.
Yeah. So as your journey was wrapping up, what were you feeling then?
Well, I didn't know it was wrapping up, so that's part of the story. So one of the things that kind of drove me to do this was that I had torn my ACL twice. I had 2 reconstructive surgeries on the same knee, on my right knee, to fix my ACL. So I kind of thought, well, geez, if I really want to do this hike, I better do the hardest part first, because my knee is probably stronger now than it's ever going to be in the future. And so my plan was to get all the way to Yosemite, and unfortunately, about 30 miles south of Yosemite, I took a pretty bad tumble and dislocated my knee and tore my ACL again. So I know it was a terrible way to end the hike, but I was with those guys, thankfully. So they were there when I fell, and they were able to help me. I actually had to get medevaced out on a helicopter, which was a terrible way to end my journey because I was so close to being done. But had those guys not been with me, I think I would have had a much tougher time, because they were able to drag me back up on the trail and get me down to a place where the helicopter could land and pick me up. And I was only about 5 miles outside the town of Mammoth. It was less than a 5-minute helicopter ride. Minutes are different than dollars, of course, when it comes to paying for a helicopter ride. But yeah, I had insurance for that. But that was how the journey ended. So, I didn't know it was ending that day. And I go back and I replay that day, very, very often in my mind. And it's really unfortunate. But, one of the things I really took away from that journey was just the power of one step, right? And so a lot of people will say to me, like, Dave, what did you learn about yourself? I'm like, look, I'm 51 years old. Nothing, right? I kind of know everything there is to know about myself. Like, I wasn't out there to discover myself. I was out there to discover exactly what I could do and to set a goal and finish it and say, like, wow, that was a pretty rugged thing. And as a Marine, as you know, like, we've done some very grueling things, whether it's officer candidate school or anything. I would tell you that it wasn't the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. It was definitely the most grueling thing I've ever done in my entire life, because once you start on that trail, you're either walking yourself out or you're coming out in a helicopter. And so once you start that journey, you're committed to finishing at some point, some leg of that journey. And I remember taking my very first step on that trail and thinking, like, wow, here is my first. As a matter of fact, I think I recorded it on video, like my very first step on the trailhead. And what I realized was that, in each step in and of itself is completely insignificant, right? Your step is this long, let's say. So no one step is any more significant than the other, but when you string them all together, and I look back on, I walked over 200 miles with a pack on my back through some of the most rugged terrain in the country, up and down, really steep altitude, pass faces, things like that. And I looked at it, I was like, wow, I mean, look at the power of just connecting through step after step after step. And then unfortunately, even like the power of one step ended my journey too. It was one step ended the whole journey. So it's kind of interesting because you can think about, the power of taking small steps in anything. It could be overcoming grief, or overcoming, working on addiction, or, cancer treatment, or overcoming an illness, or anything like that, recovering from an injury.
Starting a business.
Starting a business,
Yeah.
right. It could be anything. Starting a journey towards becoming a Marine, starting a journey towards retiring from the Marines. I mean, it's all
starting an investment journey.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's all when I looked at that, I was like, my God, how am I going to make it 200 and some odd miles? And then I did it by just taking one step at a time, and just keep moving forward. And that actually became more of a mantra in my life, which is like, no matter what the adversity is, whether it's currently with, the current epidemic or anything like this, like if you are walking and taking small steps, but you are always going in the direction you want to be going, you will get where you want to go a lot faster than if you turn around and start walking back the other way, or if you stop and feel sorry for yourself. Because I could have stopped at any point on that journey and just really felt sorry for myself, and I still would have had to get up and walk out of there and get out of there. So I just really realized that there is so much power in just the small steps, stringing together small steps, no matter what it is you're trying to accomplish in life.
Yeah, I agree. And that's something, and that's great that you got that reminder, but I'm sure it's something that you also got refreshed from the Marine Corps, because going through boot camp, going through OCS, they tell you just make it to the next chow, make it to the
That's
next
right.
meal. Just focus on that, not graduation date, just your next meal. Can you make it to the next meal?
Right.
And yeah, can you make it to that next stop? Take that next step. And it's very true in life, in everything that you do. Just take that one immediate step, have the vision, but take that next step.
Right.
I think it's so precious to have that wisdom, to have that understanding. But I love how you always said, don't stop, don't turn back. And that ultimately it's that one step that ended the journey for you, but yet you don't look back on the journey regretting any of it.
No.
And I'm sure going back into the surgery and therapy to bring your knee back to health must have been painful and a pain in the butt, but it still couldn't take away the experience that you had.
Right. And it didn't, like there's only one step on that trail that I regret, and it was the last one I took. But no, I look back on that and I think to myself, wow, I really did something. And when I tell people I did it, people are just like, oh my God, I can't believe you did that. You backpacked over 200 miles with no, I was like, yeah, I just went out and did it. I think that's the thing I'm most proud about, is I look back on some of the hardest days, and there were some really hard days out there, just scaling altitude. And I was like, oh my God, is this hill ever going to end? And I always got where I planned to go. And in fact, everybody that worked in my company, they were on that map thing, so they could see where I was going every single day. And one of the women that works for me came back and had a really interesting comment. She said, as I was amazed to see that, you had a plan, and every time I logged into the map, you had a circle of where you thought you were going to be that day, and you were always within a mile or two of it. She's like, you had a plan and you executed it. She's like, it was really interesting to see how, the planning process of the whole thing was really pretty accurate, and how successful you were in being at those places on those days. She found it a lot more remarkable than I did. For me, it was all based on having to get to my chow resupply, because there's, that's the hardest part about it, is you don't want to carry too much food, and you also physically can't because of that bear cam. And then if you run out of food, you're out of luck, which actually happened to that group and I one day, because we had a really, really bad thunderstorm and we ended up losing a day. So on our last day hiking, we literally were out of food hiking to our resupply point. But yeah, you just kind of, you figure it out and you
Well,
make it happen.
and it's an experience that brings you back down to the basics of survival and living.
Yeah,
And
it,
everyone should have that experience of, oh, I have to do this, otherwise I don't eat. I have to stick to this plan. I have to push through, or I don't have, whatever it is, water,
right.
food, which I need to then live and survive.
Yeah, it was interesting because that day I was telling you about, we were out of food. The whole idea was everybody's going to take whatever they had, power bars, whatever. We're just going to throw it in the middle and have a community dinner. And it was about 5:30 at night, and we were camped on the side of a stream, a really nice mountain stream. And one of the guys said, "Hey, I've got some fishing line in my pack, and with a hook on it. I may see if I can go down there and see if I can catch a fish or something." And another guy was like, "Oh, I've got this little cotton thing that looks like a fly. We should try that out." And another guy said, "Well, if you catch anything, I've got some tin foil." And I had a couple of those, if you've ever had them, the ramen, noodles in the packet, the flat square thing. And I had a couple of the packets of the seasoning left over. And I said, well, we can put some seasoning on it. Anyway, he goes down there and he catches 14 California golden trout out of, like 14 of them. And we were like, oh my
Feast.
God. So like, right, what I thought was actually going to be one of the most miserable days on the trail, like all of a sudden we just have all this fish. We're just eating these fish, and we were so hungry. God, I was eating the heads and the tails and everything. We were just so hungry. But yeah, it was that was an interesting part of the journey too. And actually
Ah,
ran into a lost hiker that was out there too. That was another, scary part of the story too, because this woman came crashing out of the woods. I thought it was a bear, because I hear this, you hear something that's not on the trail, your antennas on, and she came out and she had her map, and I, unsurprising, I was the navigator for our entire crew, because we got on top of the hill and one guy said, "Oh, look, there's Mount Whitney." I'm like, "No, you're looking south. Mount Whitney's back north." And everybody looked and they're like, "Okay, you're not navigating anymore," to that guy. Um, but this woman came crashing out of the woods and she's got maps in her hand. She said, "Do you know where we are?" And we were about to camp for the night. And I said, "Yeah, here, let me help you." And she like gives me her map. I'm like, going map sheets. I'm like, you're here." She's like, "Oh my God." She's like, "I'm 15 miles off course and I'm
mhm.
a day away from my food resupply." So we actually brought her into the camp and fed her that night and got her on her way the next morning for her resupply. But yeah, you meet some crazy things, see some crazy things out there, and meet some great people. And it's truly a community out there. There's no political discussion. There's no social media. There's no arguing out there. It's food, water, and campsites. That's all you're really thinking about. So, and staying
Yeah,
warm at
and it's
night.
so simple and it's so beautiful and it's
Mm-hmm.
so you have to be part of a group and support each other, and that's a great story, the fish, and everyone
Yeah.
had a little piece of the puzzle that you bring it together
Right.
as a team and you feasted like
Yeah.
kings
It's
on
yeah.
a
It's like
bunch of
it,
fish.
and it's kind of cool to see how a community can come together too, and how things just get really boiled down to the most basic things out there.
Yeah.
It's food, water, campsite, staying warm, and how far are you going to walk that day. And that's, other than that, everything else is just noise out there.
And yeah, and everyone should try to have a similar experience where it boils down to that, because it just refreshes you in a very weird and crazy way and connects you with life, being alive, the simplicity of what it can be all about, and how rewarding just getting your basic needs met. Well, while you're in an environment where you are pushing yourself, and that push is rewarding, and there's a lot of, I'm sure there was still a lot of introspection that took place,
Yeah.
because if you're walking, you know 10 hours a day, 8, 10, 12 hours a day, your thoughts are still going to go everywhere until you've covered everything, and then they finally quiet down, and that's
Yeah.
another really incredible thing. So where I'm not thinking anything except taking that next step and what my next meal is going to be.
Yep.
And you're living, but you're thriving in just that living space.
Exactly. Yeah, and there was the early on. I remember, because I was able to send like little text messages out on that GPS. I remember texting my wife and saying like, "This isn't as much fun as I thought it was going to be," and that was on the fourth day. And when I came back and was telling her about she's like, "When I got that text message from you, she's like, I thought you were going to quit." She's like, "You were 5 miles away from one of your designated get off the trail points," and she's like, "I was really waiting to hear from you." That said, I just decided not to do it and I left. I had no plane ticket home. I had nothing. I flew one way and figured, well, I'll just get a plane ticket when I'm ready to come home, wherever I end up. So
Yeah.
it was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Well,
Yeah, but
thank
thanks
you
for letting me share the story. Yeah.
thank you for sharing it. That's such a great story. And before we go and start playing the first time lightning round, is there information you want to share with people how to get in touch with you?
Sure. I'm on Twitter at David B. Armstrong. On Twitter, that's the best way to get in touch with me because that's open. I don't have that locked down. And this will be on Facebook. So if anybody out there knows me and hears this and hasn't been in touch with me for a while, you can hit me up on Facebook. And of course, I'm on LinkedIn, and you can always find me through my company website too.
All right, awesome.
I wasn't sure if I'm supposed to give that on this or not, but yeah, I just said
you
that,
can if you want to.
Okay,
absolutely.
Yeah. It's monumentwealthmanagement.com, but you can always find me on there too because we have the little fill out the thing or whatever. So
awesome.
Yeah.
All right, are you ready to play the first time lightning round?
I'm ready. Okay, it's right for you. I got it. Right, left, and up. Right.
Yeah, I'll cover it real quick for if somebody's listening and have never seen the show. So I'm going to give David 10 different first time options. It's similar to the app. It's literally things that I take from the app. If it's something he's done before, he says up. So you would swipe up on the app. If something he's never done, not interested, we swipe left. And if it's something that he's never done, would like to do and add to his list, then it's swipe right. Okay, first one, go to a paint night. So one of those paint and wine type of night.
I'm going to swipe left on that.
Really? Not interested in that?
Mm-hmm. Nope. I don't know why.
Oh.
I guess I'm not very artistic, creative. Painting's never sparked any sort of passion for me. I would do it for the social aspect of it, maybe.
Okay. So
maybe I swipe up and to the left, maybe. I don't know. Can I go back and forth a little bit?
It's always safer to put it on the list. And then if it never happens, it never happens. But if the opportunity presents itself, then you're like, yeah, why not? Why not try it? I have to say, one of the things about before I started my journey, first time in new experiences, I never considered myself artistic. Like, sport, Marines, right? So sports, outdoors, I'm there. That's all about it. But anything artistic, music, I didn't grow up as a kid having those skills. So I just it's not for me. And then when I started this journey, I'm like, there's this whole other part of life, arts and craft and music that I've never explored. So let me go explore those. And it's been so rewarding to do that because I learned that creating with your hands, doing things, and the thing with the paint night is you're following directions, but yet it's just so cool because you're making something and time just stops for me when I create. And so I definitely have embraced that. So I recommend it for people to give it a shot.
If it was a night, it was like, if it was different than painting, because I think it's the painting that I really don't have any, but if it was sort of like a, hey, learn to do some woodworking or learn to blow glass and drink wine or something like that, that would be right. I think it's just painting has never really had any sort of, I don't even like to paint the wall when I have to paint the house. So yeah, I think it's the painting part that I just don't have a part. Yeah.
Right. Very well. Okay. Yep. Next one, hunt deer.
That is a definite left. No.
Hunting is not for you.
It's definitely not for me. I am such an animal lover. I am the person who just the other day we were having some landscaping done in our yard, and there was some equipment, and one of the landscapers came to me and said, "Hey, there's a big snake underneath our stuff. Can we kill it?" And I said, "Well, what kind of snake? Is it a water moccasin?" He's like, "No, it's a big black snake." I'm like, "Well, they're not poisonous. They're not harmful. As a matter of fact, they eat the moccasins and the mice and everything else. So no, you can't kill it. Like, we have to shoo it off the property." So I'll save anything. I'll put spiders outside. I have a hard time with that.
Okay. Yep. Excellent. Write a book.
Oh, definitely swipe right. So yep. Definitely want to do that. I'm always, I have a journal that I keep of ideas to write, and I've got more ideas to write about than I have time left on this earth to write books. So I just need to narrow it down and get something done.
Yeah. Get that first one done.
Yes, awesome. Exactly. Yes.
Okay. Take an advanced driving course.
Oh, that's definitely a swipe right on that. I would do that in a second.
Okay. Clean the oven.
Okay, so I get a weird satisfaction out of cleaning things. I don't know if that comes from our time in the Marines or not, but I'm a swipe right on cleaning the oven, if because I'll get that sense of satisfaction of seeing it be done and clean. So
okay, but you haven't done it. You've never done it yet.
Oh,
No,
I
yeah,
forgot about the up.
yeah.
So I feel like I've cleaned the oven by turning it on clean and letting the oven do the work. So
Yeah, it is. It is
yeah,
much harder these days to do
when,
that.
yeah. When you said it, I saw myself like scrubbing. Like yeah,
I have to be a very old style oven.
right.
Yeah, and when
Yeah,
I put it on the list, honestly, that's what I saw. I saw me scrubbing because it's a
yeah.
chores first category, and it's funny because I had been staying away from asking people a chores first question, and then I posted one on Facebook, which was mow the lawn, and a bunch of people came out of the woodwork saying they had never mowed a lawn before, and I was
Oh
just
wow.
adults, and I was just blown away. Like, how have you never mowed a lawn before? So,
It's all those Arizona people, right? You guys don't have yards out there.
so well, I was like, I will never take it for granted that somebody, just because they're an adult, actually had done that chore. Okay,
Huh.
moving on to the next one.
Okay.
Drive a Ferrari.
That's a swipe right. I've never driven I've ridden in one, but I've never driven one before.
Okay, so we're adding it to the list.
Mm-hmm.
Learn and or do the tango.
Left. Dancing is
Mm,
like painting. Just not a dancer.
not a
Too
dancer.
self-conscious, too no rhythm. Just I don't know. I have flashbacks back to being in sixth grade and standing against the wall and having to walk all the way across the gym to ask a girl to dance. I think that was the end of my dancing days right there in sixth grade.
Oh, but see that creates a huge space where there can be a lot of growth.
I know. I have to answer honestly though. So
Oh, yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. No,
yeah,
and I'm just, and that's the beauty of these things. You get to
yep.
know somebody a lot more, and then maybe, it gets you thinking like, huh,
Mhm.
well, yeah, maybe I'm not, well, actually I do have pretty good rhythm, but what I love about dancing is that it really makes you work on your coordination. So when it comes to that body mind connection and keeping the brain engaged, dancing is one of those great ways of doing that. Okay, next one, play rugby.
That's a swipe up, but I never fell in love with it.
Mm, okay. It's a complicated sport to understand.
Yeah, I understood the aspect of like the scrum. Like I just never fell in love with the game. People go crazy about it, and I just
Not you.
yeah, it wasn't me.
Okay. Next one. Eat Japanese cuisine.
Oh, that's a swipe up.
Swipe up. One was
Yes.
do you remember your first time?
Was definitely when I deployed over to Okinawa and went into Tokyo for and Mount Fuji, the whole area. I feel like that was the first time I really started to eat a lot of Japanese cuisine.
Yeah. Good food.
Yeah.
Best steak I ever had was in Japan.
Yeah,
Kobe,
I don't
Kobe
doubt it.
steak.
Yeah,
Oh my
sure.
God. Yep. Okay, last one. It's in your wheelhouse.
Okay.
Invest in commodities.
Oh, so it's a swipe up. Um, but it's also a swipe left a little bit. So I don't invest in commodities anymore, but I have in the past.
Was it good wise investment, or since you
Well,
don't do it anymore, you're like, not worth the effort.
I don't want to get too wonky into what I do, but it's really hard to, commodities are all based on supply and demand. And so the price of a commodity is truly based on, is there more supply than demand, or is there more demand than supply? So whether it's gold or pork bellies or, soybeans or coffee, it doesn't matter. Oil is a good one everybody kind of understands. It's impossible to predict supply and demand. And in my world, if I can't predict what I think is going to happen with it, if I don't have any sort of true insight into it, I don't think that the risk reward is there because I don't
Mm,
have any skill in guessing right. I'm a terrible
yeah.
guesser. Yeah. Yeah. With
All right.
stocks, you can kind of like project their cash flows and their earnings and everything. So you can kind of see if something's undervalued, but you truly have no idea what's going on with supply and demand. So I stay away from it.
All right. Excellent. Okay. Now, final question is,
Okay.
how have you been making the best of the current situation with the pandemic?
Well, I own a business, and so we haven't been back to our office for 4 months now. So there's 10 of us that work there, and so I think I've been making the best of it from a business perspective by just embracing technology and really, I feel like I'm actually in more contact with everybody now because we have to be. I just don't see people in the office. So I've been making the most of it by just leveraging technology and making an effort to be in touch with everybody. I mean, it's been amazing to me. If you want to look for some silver linings of this whole epidemic, it's that, from a technology and a cultural perspective, we've jammed 10 years into 6 weeks. If you had asked me 5 months ago how long it would take for me to have a completely virtual firm where clients and employees were all comfortable using video and everything, I said, probably not in my lifetime, but maybe we'll make some progress over the next decade. 6 weeks later, here we are. So I think I've been making the most out of it by just doing this sort of stuff. And I've also discovered that I'm a lot more efficient because no one's around me unless I'm engaging with them on video. So I'm actually a lot more productive and getting a lot more stuff done. So I'm reading a lot more. And I have a little bit more balance, like personal time balance. I'm not commuting anywhere. I'm not fighting traffic. I'm not going out to dinners at night. So my life has really settled down and quieted a little bit.
And I'm going to take it when things do shift back to being able to be out there more. Are you going to return to the former, or are you going to embrace a lot more of what has taken place in the last few months?
Total swipe right embrace. Yeah, on that. And we've already actually started to do it. We have already decided as an organization that even if things go back to normal, whatever that means and whenever that is, we're not going to go back to a Monday through Friday 9 to 5 work schedule. We've already implemented that. We're going to go to a work from home Mondays and Fridays. So I'm going to, and here in Washington, D.C., cutting 40% of everybody's weekly commute out is a big deal. So those 2 days are going to be work from home. And I've, for the past 4 months, I've had a completely good experience with everybody working from home. Everybody's working. So I don't see any reason why I need to tell everybody to come back into the office, especially if we're not doing that much face-to-face with clients. If we're doing a lot more with video and clients, I don't know if I'm ever going back to normal. And thankfully, my lease on my office space is up in 2 years, because I don't think we'll stay in that size of space. I think we'll cut it in half. And if people want to have personal offices, they can decorate something at home and work from home on a day that they need their office. So myself included, I don't know where all my marine stuff's going to go that my wife will let me have in the house, but I'll find some place for it to
go. To build out a man cave.
I know, right? It's funny because, like, you leave places, and this in the Marines, and they'll give you like a big picture or something inside, and all of a sudden you're like, I just don't have enough wall space to hang all of this stuff up. Like, geez. But yeah, this has definitely driven a change in our corporate culture and a change in the way we're going to do business going forward.
Well, I love that. Lots of shifting, adaptation, and embracing what's happening, and making sure that moving forward, it's all more efficient and better it.
I've got an employee who just said, well, hey, if we're all working from home, do you mind if I go to London for a month? I was like, no, as long as you're on our same time schedule, I don't care. Go. It's great. So I've got an employee in Denver. I've got an employee in San Antonio. One was just out in California area. The one's going to London. So we got people just kind of taking advantage of it by saying, well, if I'm going to work remote, maybe I want to go be other places. So it's really, really interesting to see how people are reacting to this.
Yeah. And they're probably seeing themselves, same thing, right? They can get more done in less time, giving them more time to do other things that they enjoy, which all in all makes them more productive.
Exactly.
It's one of those things people have been saying that is a truth and a fact and how it works, but everybody in the back of their mind were like, no, if people are not sitting at the office, they're not going to be doing what they're supposed to be doing. And that's one thing with the pandemic's like, well, hold my beer. I'll show you that that's not how it works.
Right. Yeah. And I also suspect, I'm not experiencing this, but I'll bet you in companies that have more people in it, they're discovering the people that would sit at their desk all day and they thought they were really busy. Now the only way you can really judge somebody is on them actually doing stuff that you can see, like writing something and all of a sudden you're like, I got to imagine there's a lot of companies out there who are like, hey, Johnny, we haven't heard from him in 3 weeks. What's he been doing? And nobody knows. And maybe companies are going to start to identify some of their people that really weren't adding much value to their company in the first place. Or they'll discover the people the exact opposite, which is, wow, this person carries a lot of water for our firm. There's, we should be thinking about training them and promoting them. There'll be a lot of that discovery, I think.
I think so too. All right. Well, David, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure hearing your story, your wisdom, and sharing this time with you.
Yes, thank you very much. It was a real pleasure to be on here, and I look forward to seeing how your upcoming interview with Norm goes.